Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
A very good morning and welcome. This is Newsline. We're coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Today happens to be the 14th of February 2017. For all of those who are celebrating, happy Valentine's Day to you. I don't really know the relationship between love and law, but I think we'll find out. Let me introduce our guests to you this morning. Mr. Jeff Alagaratnam, President's Counsel and President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And also Mr. Chandaka Jayasundara, Attorney at Law, and also the Chairman of the National Law Conference 2017.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Jayasundara, what is the National Law Conference all about? Let's start off with that question.
The National Law Conference is the premier conference for the Bar Association and the lawyers of Sri Lanka. It's held annually, sometimes out of Colombo as a residential conference, but this time in Colombo. So that's where we try to bring all the thought leaders in the legal profession, and this time also from outside, and basically have a educative. The general thing that we have done up to now is to have more academic sessions of particular subjects, but this time we are changing the concept of the conference into more introspection of what we should do and where we should be going.
Mr. Alagaratnam, this year's conference goes on the theme of a contemplation of the law and the way forward. What does this really mean?
As perhaps Chandaka will explain to you, what we are looking at is to get all the stakeholders in, not merely lawyers to talk about the law, but get various segments like civil society, the commercial sector, the various other professional organizations to participate to see what is the law doing today. Let's look at it, have a deep, close look. Is it relevant? Where should it go? Is it fulfilling the aspirations of society and the people? It's just not good enough if the lawyers are happy doing what they're doing every day. But do we have meaning, relevance? Do we take value to society? And are we really something that serves society well? So for that, we have to have periodic reflection. We have to have periodic consideration of what the whole system is about. What are the laws? Are they working well? And what do we do about it? Do people feel that the law is friendly? It should be people friendly, because otherwise you think law is something monopolized by the lawyers and the judges, where people are scared to enter the court of law. They don't realize that it is there to serve them. So that to bring about that message, to look at it, to contemplate what it is about and what it should be. And this is something I think it's not just to do with a National Law Conference. It's an ongoing exercise, because we have to constantly review, maybe periodically, to see whether we are getting it right, whether we are getting it better, whether we are more meaningful, and keep going. We cannot give up. We may not have success overnight, but these are long-term goals. But we have to be conscious that all of us have to work together, not only the lawyers and the judges, professionals, civil society, and that's what it is all about.
Mr. Jayasundara, sometimes people tend to say that there's a massive disconnect between the law on the one hand and the general public. Do you see this?
There is a disconnect to the extent of access to justice, but the law is what is needed by society. So that's one of the themes that we are trying to follow, and that we want to make an introspection as to, are we doing what is required? And to do that, whether we should go back to our roots, go back to the jurisprudential theories, and to see what are we doing. Are we just going to court, doing a case and coming back, or is there a more responsible role for a lawyer to do? And also whether access to justice can be made more easier for the people. So in that context, we are bringing in outside stakeholders, like from the, as Mr. Alagaratnam said, from civil society, from the corporate sector, some politicians, from the political sphere, and for them to tell us what is wrong with the system, if there is anything wrong, and in their view, what is required from the legal profession and the justice system in general.
How important is a non-stakeholder's point of view of the law for it to be considered, sir?
I think it's very critical, because the law is there not only to serve the needs of the lawyers, the whole system is there for society. Because if you realize, the whole idea of democracy and the rule of law rests ultimately on the courts, because we, under our constitution, there are three main organs: Parliament, the executive, President, the cabinet of ministers, and the judiciary. So these serve as controls, checks and balances on each other to make sure that we fulfill the aspirations of a democratic society to the rule of law. So it is important for us to see whether the law is really serving that purpose. And the best person to criticize us and the best person to tell us whether they are satisfied with how things are going is civil society, the professional organizations, the corporate sectors, be it in the criminal law, whether the processes are too slow, be it in the commercial sector, whether litigation takes years, be it in, let's say, general civil rights, the fundamental rights, whether we know that everybody's interests are protected, and whether we know and we realize that the law is truly equal. As Chandaka was mentioning, access to justice is critical, because if every citizen cannot feel that he has an equal right to courts and he has an equal chance of justice, then I don't think the law is fulfilling what it should do. So that there should be an ability on the part of everybody, if there is a genuine violation of their rights, to go to courts, get justice, not at a very, very expensive level, but it should be easily got, should be people-friendly, as I said.
But when you speak of access to justice, there are mechanisms, for example, the Legal Aid Commission of Sri Lanka. So are you saying that these mechanisms are not sufficient?
I would say that they could improve. I would not say that they're entirely sufficient, because I would say, for example, the Legal Aid Commission is doing a good job with the limited resources and the limited finances. But there is more that can be done. And I would, now that you have posed the question of legal aid, the Bar Association is looking at the aspect of covering persons who are not able to obtain, let's say, legal aid from the Legal Aid Commission because they have a slab, 25,000 a month, monthly earning. But I would think in today's society, even a family that earns about 35,000 to 40,000 a month needs legal aid, because litigation is so expensive. So the Bar Association has recently begun and relaunched its legal aid services, so that people from any walk of life, if they have a genuine case and they are deprived of justice purely because of their income levels, they could come to the bar, we assess their case and see how the way forward is. And talking of access to justice, it's not merely going to court, because there are many methods by which you could resolve problems. One is arbitration, mediation, negotiation. We should try all that before we end up in courts.
So these are alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, and this will also be one of the topics of discussion at the National Law Conference. Could you elaborate on that, Mr. Johnson?
The preferred alternate dispute resolution method at the moment is arbitration, but as far as that is mostly commercial. But if you look at community access to justice, mediation is one of the best forms of resolving disputes at the moment. So now the limits have gone up, so now even commercial disputes are going in for mediation. So we are thinking of having a session on whether arbitration is the best preferred method or whether we should move on to other methods of resolution. And mediation is becoming a hot topic because they are now trying to promote commercial mediation. So that is one specific section that we are dealing with in one session, whether arbitration is the preferred alternative or whether we should go to mediation, maybe conciliation also. So access to justice does not mean just how you get into the system, but how you resolve a dispute. So that's why we are looking at alternatives and whether we should only go to court or whether there are better ways of resolving disputes without fighting it out in court.
Ms. Alakaratnam, one of the other areas that will be taken up at the National Law Conference is legal reform. Now, something that we find is most of our laws are archaic, and that the legal reform process takes years and years, and sometimes the will is not really there. How do you view this as the president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka?
Sadly, yes, legal reform is slow. It's lacking. I suppose it also depends on the will of our legislators. There are certain efforts made, but I think there could be much more effort. You take, for example, our marriage laws. Now, for a long time, we've been talking about reforming the grounds of divorce. In other countries, it's the breakdown principle. In Sri Lanka, we still talk of adultery, malicious desertion, incurable impotency. Those three may be based on Christian concepts, whereas in England, it's different. We obtained this from England, and England has gone away, and we are still in these old archaic concepts, as you say.
Sure.
Similarly, in property law, haven't we got to think out of the box? Do we think of the traditional building on a land, building goes to the land, or can't we think of like the condominium law, or can't we have buildings over a railway line, okay, or underground trains, so that there is a lot of innovative thinking, not only to streamline the procedures. The Ministry of Justice has tried to streamline it by amending the Civil Procedure Code to provide for pre-trial conferences, to resolve matters at the early stage, to identify the core issues rather than going to long trials, so that you finalize the documentation and what the problems are. And also to provide for affidavit evidence rather than have long drawn out oral evidence which takes 2 or 3 days. Now these are all measures, but one thing is certain, that these have to be pushed a little faster. It's a little slow, little long time coming. And another thing is there's the will and the capacity of the people. I think in this whole thing, it's everybody's to blame, because whether it's the lawyers, the litigants, the judiciary, the court staff, there has to be an attitudinal change.
So how do we bring about this attitudinal change?
First of all, we have to say one thing is that there has to be a will and a desire to move things faster, not merely at the expense of justice, but to streamline our procedures, to have more competent court staff, judges, lawyers, and also the litigants should know that they cannot just drag cases, because if you have a bad case, a litigant likes to drag a case, or you file a case because you know you want to teach a guy a lesson and you just drag it. So in that sense, there is this perennial problem of laws delays, and I think places like Malaysia, Singapore, they took about 15 years to address it, to solve it. So we should not panic, but we have to work at it. That's the important thing. So we should not lose hope, and I think we have to go on.
That is one of the main themes of the conference, because we need to change as lawyers. We have no control over the litigants, we have no control over policy. So as lawyers we need to change. So to change we must know what we are doing and what we should be doing. So that is the theme that is going through the conference, is we have to change. And the whole attempt is to figure out how we need to change.
Mr. Jayasundara, in terms of policy, how do you suppose policymakers need to look at this, the laws delays, and really taking this forward?
Yeah, I think even the policymakers and the government and the state and all stakeholders know that we have a huge problem. It's better than what it was, say, 10-15 years ago, where now a commercial case will finish very optimistically in about 3 years. Complexity-wise, that's the same amount of time that it takes in Singapore, or maybe not Singapore, maybe in England.
However, you take cases related to property law.
Yes, that's true.
They drag on for 30-40 years.
Those issues have been accepted. It has been accepted that we need to change. It's the next step that is not happening. I think it's a capacity issue. Like if you are going to change laws, there's huge problems with translations. It's huge problems with legal drafting. Like every act has to go in for a single, it's actually single Tamil and in English translation. So that takes a huge time. So the issue has been identified. I think more or less we know where we should make the changes, because it has been done in Singapore and Malaysia, which was also like us 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we know where we should go. It's just that the next step is not happening. Issues have been identified, I think, even by the policymakers.
We're in conversation with Mr. Jeffrey Alagaratnam, President's Counsel, and Mr. Chandaka Jayasundara. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsline. We're in conversation with Mr. Jeff Alagaratnam and Mr. Chandaka Jayasundara. We were talking about laws delays and the issues associated with the legal system in Sri Lanka. Constitutional reform is a topic of discussion that has been really making the rounds. Do you see a third Republican constitution as a successful way forward, sir?
I definitely do, because there are a lot of deficiencies in the existing constitution. For example, one of the things that was spoken about not only at the last election but at previous election was the excessive power in the executive presidency.
Which has been curtailed by now.
There was a cry for abolition. There was a promise of abolition. So whether that's coming or not coming is the question. The other thing is also the strengthening of public institutions to ensure that democratic rights of the people are protected to a great extent. Whether you look at the judiciary, the public service, the police, the elections commission, those are vital institutions to uphold the democratic rights of the people, because in Sri Lanka, according to our constitution, it's the people who are sovereign, not the politician. So if the people are sovereign, how is their sovereignty upheld? Who upholds it? And what we have to realize is not only the politician, all public servants, be they the police, be they the public service, be they the judiciary, hold all their positions in trust for the people. Do they realize it? Can they fulfill it free of any interference and with complete independence and with also competence and capacity? Being independent alone is not enough. You've got to have the competence and capacity to deliver. So in that sense, a lot of these things are being re-looked at, and a third Republican constitution is critical and essential to move forward to ensure that in the future there is a fair degree of protection of the people's rights. We cannot get a 100% perfect constitution, nobody can, but we have to work to it, but it is needed.
Mr. Jayasundara, the National Law Conference 2017 will also be dealing with this concept of constitutional reform.
Yes, constitutional reform also, and we also want to focus on not only political rights, we have to look at social rights, cultural rights, so the rights of the disabled, the aged, like gender issues, educational rights. So when you talk of constitutional reforms, you are talking on, mostly everybody is talking about political rights. We want to go more into the other aspects of like cultural and social reforms that is needed. The legal reforms also we are dealing with, but we want to expand the conversation on constitutional reform, not only on political rights but on other reforms or other rights also.
Let's also talk about some of the speakers who will be joining in.
With regard to the constitutional reform, Dr. Jayampathy Wickramaratne, I think, who is involved in the process at the moment, will be speaking on constitutional reform.
He's a member of the steering committee.
Yes,
on
that's right. Then Dr. Dinesha Samaratna from the University of Colombo, she is looking in at social and cultural reforms. Mr. Salih Piris is looking at legal reform, that is procedural and substantive law. Our keynote address will be by Mr. Kanageshwaran, K. Kanageshwaran, on the thematic aspects of the conference. He and Dr. Sivaji Felix will also be going into the jurisprudential aspects of what is the law or what the law should be. Then we have a session between Mr. Faiz Mustafa as to how a lawyer looks at a brief, and retired Justice Salim Masuf on how a judge looks at a brief, whether moral considerations, ethical considerations, especially lawyers, whether you should look at ethical considerations before accepting a brief. Then we have the more specialized subjects of alternate dispute resolution, then one of the changing areas of apartment law, that's condominium property law. Then we have two very specific subjects on commercial litigation, with the litigation law there is an alternative, and also on criminal law about mandatory sentencing and sanctioning, like this 25,000 fine on driving, whether such high sanctions or even the death sentence will reduce crime, or whether you can use sanctions as a deterrent rather than just punishment.
A non-stakeholder view of the legal system is also
yes,
one of the areas.
that's our opening session where we want outsiders to come and tell us we are wrong.
Let's tell our viewers the names.
Mr. Iran Vikramaratne will be talking about, he is from the corporate sector, so he's talking about the corporate's viewpoint as well as a politician or a policymaker. Then Mr. Krishanta Pereira, who was former chairman and a member of the monetary board from the corporate sector, and then Dr. Jehan Pereira from civil society, with regard to how the civil society looks at the legal system.
Ms. Alakaratnam, this culture of doing work pro bono, is it really entrenched in our system?
It's not sufficient. I think there are a lot of lawyers, many lawyers, who would definitely willingly do work for a poor litigant if they are convinced that justice is needed. But we have to build up a greater awareness of the need for it and make it a sort of a duty and a responsibility and a challenge. Because there's no point saying that all are equal if some cannot have easy access to justice because of financial constraints. So this culture has to be built up. It could be done more effectively, and we have to keep striving. And
so how do we practically go about doing this?
Yes, we have also requested senior lawyers, the silks, law firms, who have agreed on a yearly basis to at least handle a minimum of 2 to 3 cases pro bono, provided they are satisfied of the justice of the case, that they demand justice, the income levels, and that provided there's no conflict of interest as far as the individual lawyer or firm is concerned. So that has to be built up. There has to be greater awareness. We have been publicizing about free legal aid clinics. So we can do a little more for this, and we hope we can build up in time to come, but it is essential.
When speaking of policy and politicians, do you think, as the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, do you think that there needs to be more allocations with regard to things like legal aid and providing people with the necessary framework?
I think so, because I think first of all there has to be more allocations for legal aid, definitely, because legal aid is doing a good job with the limited resources and staff. They could be allotted much more money. And I think not only that, not only the government, but I think also the private sector should play a critical role. We talk of CSR. So whether as a part of the CSR there could be some input from the private sector, because after all, if we want to preserve democracy and have a peaceful society, everybody's rights should be protected and we should serve them. So I think a lot could be done as far as legal aid is concerned, and maybe a little more could be done as far as infrastructure and capacity building of judges as well as of the court staff. Because technology alone won't help, but first of all you have to develop your skills in judgments or hearing cases of the court staff, in handling records. Just as much as even lawyers need to build capacity much more, because we are now moving, the world moves fast. Technology, innovativeness, we talk of BPOs, LPOs. Are we geared to hold our own with foreign lawyers, with foreign legal systems, international trade? How much are we giving our lawyers and our profession to constantly build up their capacity and go into new areas, as well as improve their knowledge and their ability to handle different types of, say, litigation or different types of legal matters?
Something that we've seen over the recent past, over the recent few years, is the fact that there is a great influx of lawyers coming into the profession. Is Sri Lanka as a country geared to take on this? I
think we are bursting because whether there is opportunity for all these people who are passing out, no doubt most of the lawyers don't come from very wealthy backgrounds perhaps, and they need a lot of initial support in their first 5 years. And many of the lawyers who pass out are not necessarily people who are going to go into a court of law and practice. They are going into the corporate sector. They are going into maybe the public sector. They might go into the judiciary or the official bar, so that to gear them with a multidisciplinary skill. Because if you're going to the corporate sector, your upward mobility is important. You cannot just be a lawyer. You've got to be able to do negotiations, finances, management. Then you're acceptable to the organization. So sometimes we have lawyers who are only lawyers who may not progress well in, let's say, the banking or the private sector. So those are things that the bar is committed to do. We need a lot of support. It's a big challenge. And one of the things we also have to look at very seriously is the percentage of ladies coming into the profession. So we have gender rights. That's a very critical area. And that's why Chandaka will elaborate. We're having a session on gender-based violence and the attitude to gender situations, because for example, the police, for example, public authorities able to handle gender violence or discrimination against a woman, because very often in our culture, our society, we think, okay, the woman is less important than the man, and when a woman goes into a police station, how is she treated? Okay, so those are aspects that have to be looked at to have a social consciousness. It's not a question of a fad of the equality of the sexes or the gender, but it's a question of women being important to society, and they are being equal partners with the men. So is our culture, are our institutions able to accept it? We are accused of male chauvinism, so how do we go forward?
And especially with regard to gender-based violence, we are having a session on how the justice system, not only gender, we are looking at a gender-based violence perspective, but as far as social problems are concerned, domestic violence, gender-based violence, how the legal system is geared to do it, whether the lawyers are ready and sensitive, whether the judiciary is sensitive and ready to meet these new issues coming up, and also how the police and the legal system will look at it. So we are looking at that is one aspect of how the legal system will address new issues that come up now, social issues which are becoming very, very important.
Mr. Jayasundar, let's tell our viewers when the National Law Conference will be
it's to be held. The inauguration is on the 15th. That's on Wednesday.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
With the participation of His Excellency the President as the chief guest, with Mr. Kanagishwaran doing the keynote address. Then we are having the sessions on Thursday and Friday, full days, and then we are finishing off with a felicitation dinner for senior attorneys who have completed 50 years this year, which are about six are coming in. So we are felicitating them. That's the end of the sessions on Friday, but the sessions will be on Thursday and Friday at the Golf Face Hotel.
My final question is to you, Mr. Alagaratnam. Are you hopeful of the future of the legal profession of Sri Lanka?
Hope is something I always have, and I don't think we should ever lose hope. We will have the ups and downs, we'll have the frustrations, the setbacks, but unless you keep going, you cannot see success, you cannot see improvement. We may not achieve everything we want to, but if you keep working at it, you can. And I always believe in one principle: no man is defeated until he quits.
Thank you very much. On that note, we wrap up this edition of Newsline. Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey Alagaratnam, President's Council and Bar Association President.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here and sharing our views.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandaka Jayasundara, Chairman of the National Law Conference 2017. Just an invitation to you to join in the National Law Conference of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka on the 15th of February, that's tomorrow, until the 17th at the Golf Face Hotel. MTV MBC are the media sponsors of this event. Have a great morning ahead.